What's up, Mass Family? This is Lauren Spires, your summer camp and after-school program expert with the Martial Arts Success Team. And I want to go ahead and go over with you the top 5 indoor games that you can play with your kids that, number 1, don't require any equipment, and number 2, these are actually really quiet games that the kids can play. So let's go ahead and get started and go through how to play 4 corners. All right, so first of all, imagine that your room is divided into 4 imaginary quarters. So when I say imaginary, I truly mean imaginary. You don't need to mark the room. However, you will need to give clear instructions to your students so that they understand how to play. All right, so 4 quarters, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You will select one student to be quote unquote it, or what's known as the counter. We actually use this selection as an incentive for well-behaved kids, or better yet, if you have a student who maybe wasn't making the best choices and now has had improved behavior, is making better choices, you might want to select that kid as well so that they feel special, they feel encouraged to keep making good choices. So, because kids love being the counter, they love being it. All right, so place your selected student in the middle of the room. If the space that you're using has mirrors, make sure that the student is facing away from the mirror, and this prevents any accidental peeking. So they don't have that mirror that's in front of them, it'll be behind them. All right, so the selected student will then count to 10, and the rest of the class will tiptoe around that student and then get into one of those 4 corners. Once the student who's in the middle of the room gets down to 10, he or she will go corner number, and then they'll pick one, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So any student who is in the corner that has been selected is out at that point. And they have to go and sit along the wall, crisscross, and wait until the end of that round of 4 corners. So then what will happen is this process will repeat again. So again, we've only gone through 1 round. So a group has gone out, they're sitting against the wall, and now the counter is going to go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And again, they'll say corner number 1, 2, 3, or 4. So this process will continue to repeat until you get down to your last student. Now, here's a little pro tip. When you get down to having 4 kids or less that are still in the game and they're still participating, you want to let them know every single one of you has to be in a different corner, because the last thing that you want is this herd of 4 kids that go all into corner number 1. Because then what will end up happening is the game will just continue and it will never end. And eventually you want these games to end. So once everybody has gone, you got down to your one last student. That one last student who is still in the game is the winner. And better yet, they actually are the new round for the counter. So now that student will then go into the center of the room and a new game of 4 corners will begin. And that's how you play 4 corners. All right, number 2, Mr. Mayor. So this one is super fun. It's really silly, and your coaches will absolutely get a kick out of it. So for this game, you'll have all of the students seated facing in one direction. Again, if you're using a space that has a mirror, make sure that all of the students are facing away from the mirror. Select one student to go to the front of all the kids, turn around so that their back is facing the seated kids, and then have them close their eyes. We'll call this student number 1. Once student number 1 has their eyes closed, quietly select another student and have them stand at the back of the room facing toward the students. And we'll call this one student number 2. So student number 2 will then say in a funny or unusual voice, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? Now, of course, this is my normal voice, but if I was playing this game, I might say something like, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? Or I might go, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? So you can see very quickly how this can be very entertaining. not only for the kids, but also for the staff as well. All right, so then once student number 2, of course, says, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? Student number 1, who again has their eyes closed and is facing away from the students, will have to try and guess who student number 2 is. If they guess incorrectly, then student number 2 will try again using another funny voice, or they can use the same voice. It's really up to the student at that point. So they'll say again, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? And then again, student number 1 will have to try and guess who student number 2 is. If they guess incorrectly, then one last time, student number 2 will say, Mr. Mayor, do you know who I am? At that point, student number 1 only has one last attempt at guessing who student number 2 is. If they guess incorrectly, then student number 2 will replace student number 1. And then, of course, student number 1 will go ahead and have a seat at that point. And then you'll pick someone new to be student number 2 for another round of Mr. Mayor. And that's how you play the game. All right, guys. Number 3, Heads Up, 7 Up. So this is a really great game to play in a classroom setting. It can be played with a student seated on the floor. However, it is best to be played while they're at tables and chairs. So while having all the kids seated, you'll select 7 students from the group. Those students will then push in their chairs and walk to the front of the classroom. Then you or your coach will instruct the students who are not one of the 7 that you selected to put their heads down and their thumb up. Then the 7 students will tiptoe around the classroom and lightly tap on the thumb of one of the students, and then the student will then put their thumb down. So then once all 7 of the students have tapped on one child each, the coach will say, Heads up, 7 up. And the students who were tapped will then stand up and stay by their chair. Then one at a time, you'll give each one of those students who just stood up the opportunity to try to guess who it was that tapped them. Now, when the student guesses correctly, then they switch places with that kid. Now, if they do select incorrectly, then they simply just sit back down. So once everyone has guessed, and at that point, then you'll only have 7 students standing. They might be some of the same students, and they might be a whole new different round of new students. It just depends on how well the kids guess who it was that selected them. So once you are back to the beginning again, now you have 7 students, and the remainders are seated. It's time for another round of Heads Up, 7 Up. The students who are seated will put their heads down and one thumb up, and then you are ready for another round. Number 4, Spot the Leader. So this is probably one of my favorite indoor games, if not my actual favorite game to play at camp or in after school. So anyway, so here's how you play. So you have all of the students come in and sit in a circle. This is one big circle with everyone. Then you'll select one student who you'll refer to as the spotter. So have that student face away from the circle and then close their eyes. Again, if you have a mirror, make sure that the spotter is facing away from the mirror and away from the circle. Then silently select a second student. And this student is the leader. So you have to do this very, very quietly. And of course, all the kids are going to be raising their hand and because they want to be the leader, because that's super fun. All right, so with the spotter still outside of the circle, the leader is going to start doing a movement or making a sound that all of the kids in the circle must follow. So just to give you an example, so the leader might start tapping on the ground for a few moments, and then they'll start tapping on their head or on their shoulders, and then they might switch and start snapping their fingers, then maybe even doing a combo of like a pat clap combination. But they want to keep doing this consistently so that everybody in the circle gets their rhythm, gets their pattern of their motion that they're doing. So they don't want to do things too rapidly. Like they don't want to start snapping their fingers and then all of a sudden start clapping their hands, because they're not going to get that right away. So usually it's about 10 seconds and then the student will transition into doing something different. So once the leader has started his or her first action, then you'll have the spotter come back in. They'll go to the center of the circle and start looking around and trying to figure out who is leading the group, hence, the leader. So they're trying to figure out who that leader is. So the goal is that no one says who the leader is, and if the leader is clever, they'll actually wait until the spotter has their back to them before they change into doing a different action. So the spotter can guess up to 3 times to try and figure out who the leader is. And if after the 3rd time the spotter can't figure it out, then the leader will reveal themselves and will actually switch places and they'll become the spotter themselves for the next round. Now, if the spotter can guess correctly who the leader is, well, then good for them. They're the winner. They can't exactly become the leader because then everybody would know who it is and you wouldn't really have a game. But that is how you play Spot the Leader. The kids love this game. It's super fun to watch the kids play and try and figure out who is who. And it's pretty exciting. So great game to play. All right, guys, it is time for your 5th and final indoor game, Sleeping Elephants. So this game is actually commonly referred to as Dead Elephants, but for obvious reasons, we don't call any of our games Dead anything. So we call it Sleeping Elephants instead. So this will be the quietest, most relaxing game that you'll play. And there's 2 main reasons why. So the first reason is because you'll have your hardcore kids that they must win at everything, and so they have to do their best and they have to beat everyone in the group. And then the second reason is because some students will actually just simply fall asleep. So there's 2 main reasons why this game will be nice and quiet and relaxing. So with that being said, this is how the game is played. So first of all, you want to make sure that you play the game on mats because like I said, some of the kids are going to fall asleep. You want them to be nice and comfortable. So here's what you do. You or your coach will count to 10. And during that time, all the students will scatter around the room. And then once you get to 10, you'll call out Sleeping Elephants. Then all the kids will lay down and they won't move. The rules of the game are simple. If you move, you're out. Now, of course, you want to be a little bit more lenient with like your younger students. I mean, they're still figuring out how to stand in a line correctly. But for the most part, you're looking for wiggling fingers and toes, shifting of their head, breathing and blinking. Don't count that as being out, but any other movement is grounds for being out. Once you're down to your last student, they're the winner and they get to be the watcher for the next round of Sleeping Elephants. So during that original round, you or your coach would be what was considered to be the watcher. So the watcher is going to sit in the chair and then watch for movement. They'll be the one that counts to 10 and then, of course, calls out Sleeping Elephants. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, this will be by far the quietest and most relaxing indoor game. This is a really great way to get the kids calmed down, especially if they've just gotten done playing like dodgeball or they're doing an outdoor sport and you need to bring them in and kind of cool them down. This is a really great activity to play during that time because, again, it is still structured, but gets them calm and gets them ready to refocus on whatever that next activity is for them. Well, there you have it. There were your top 5 indoor games that are not only fun, but they don't require equipment and they keep your students quiet while still being engaged. So, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them to the group. Dwayne and I love helping all of our members and seeing their schools grow to the next level. See you next time, guys.